The chair legs scraped stone. My granddaughter moved it aside, chin lifted. "Don't embarrass us," she said, while lilies breathed over my wife's coffin. The chapel went still. My hands held the program like it could stop shaking. Somewhere, a tiny red light told me someone was recording. I didn't answer. I pressed the paper flat, and the insult sat beside me like a second bouquet. Before we continue, tap subscribe if quiet justice matters to you. I'm Nora Hale, 64, from Seattle. The Space Needle watches in any weather. The organ hummed under the murmurs. The floor felt colder than the rain outside. I could taste metal where I bit my tongue. She was young, I told myself. She learned this tone from someone else. Still, the words found my ribs and stayed there, sharp as pins. I kept my seat and my breath. I kept my promise to Ruth, to keep the peace in public. Peace, I would learn, is a kind of math. My granddaughter's sleeve brushed my shoulder as she passed. The chair sat empty, a clean little circle where my body should have been. I became an outline in my own grief. The leaflet warmed under my palm. A drop of water fell from my coat cuff and made a dark coin on the paper. I watched it spread, slow and sure, like a decision. The chapel livestream icon glowed at 3 p.m. I hadn't noticed it before, a red dot near the front pew. A camera tucked discreetly by the column. I didn't know how long it had been on or who would watch later. I only knew that facts like that saved nurses and broke lies. Ruth taught me that, long before she needed me to prove anything for her. Ruth's picture stood on an easel near the pulpit. She had chosen a candid one, her ICU badge clipped to her pocket, hair escaping the tie. She used to come home with notes in her pocket, little reminders she wrote for herself during rounds. She loved evidence, she loved paper. She loved that the world could be persuaded by a date, a signature, a log. She would have hated this scrape, this shaming in a room built for mercy. She would have told me to tie knots, not wave flags. I tied a knot around my temper and felt it hold. People shifted in the pews. Breaths came in slow waves. I saw the funeral director glance down at a leather book he kept near the door. He had told me earlier they logged incidents for their records. I thought it was an odd line for a day like this. Now it rested in my mind like a bridge I might cross later. I did not move toward it yet. I only watched my breath and counted the lilies until the counting steadied me. The minister began. His voice carried and softened at the edges. He spoke Ruth's name as if he were returning it to the room. He invited memories. People read gentle things from cards. My son cleared his throat. My daughter-in-law arranged faces like flowers. My granddaughter sat 2 chairs away, elbow on knee, phone face down, as if the screen might learn manners from the wood. I kept my eyes on the photo and thought of Ruth's handwriting. We were never flashy, Ruth and I. We bought sturdy things and wore them until they softened to us. We matched our mugs by accident. We saved grocery receipts because savings made her smile. She said love was partly attention, partly repair. My attention was ironclad around her. My repair work, I admit, was usually for other people's messes. That's how the habit grows. You bend once, then you bend again, and then you are furniture. The chair my granddaughter moved had been set for me by a funeral attendant with kind eyes. He had patted the cushion and offered water. I'd thanked him and thought nothing more. Then the family arrived in loops of perfume and rain. Someone whispered about the program font. Someone adjusted a tie. My daughter-in-law, Vanessa, smiled the way people do when they want a picture to look natural. "Let's keep it elegant," she said, and the word elegant floated above us like a rule we didn't vote on. I tried to fit myself inside it. Elegance, it seemed, required my absence. I did not stand or object. I did not make a scene. The idea of spectacle tasted like battery acid. I kept my eyes on the picture of my wife and made my stillness a kind of protest. Grief is not pretty. It tilt-shifts your world and pulls sound through a tunnel. I felt the tunnel. I also felt the red dot of that camera like a small star I could navigate by. I was not navigating yet, but my hand found the edge of the program and aligned it with the fold like a ruler. When my turn came to speak, it came with terms. Vanessa leaned in with a microphone no one else had needed. 2 minutes, she whispered, and her breath smelled like mint tea. Keep it light. She didn't mean light like candles. She meant light like weightless. She meant remove the parts that make you human. The microphone waited, a small black mouth looking for safe words. I stepped toward it and found my voice where I'd left it, low and even. I spoke about Ruth's hands. I spoke about the way she wrote the names of her patients on sticky notes so she could pray for them properly when she got home. I spoke about the night she found my lost mitten in the driveway and tucked it into the mailbox so the snow wouldn't soak it. I spoke about the way she packed a spare granola bar in her bag in case someone needed it more. I did not speak about money. I did not speak about what I had sold to keep the house warm when she started sleeping downstairs. I did not speak about my granddaughter's tone, or the chair, or how a person learns contempt the way they learn a second language, by listening, then performing. That could wait. That needed a different room. I finished before the 2 minutes were done. I left some words inside me. That is a trick you learn when people give you timers. You leave a few important things unsaid, and they ring louder than anything you said aloud. I thanked the room. I returned the microphone. It looked relieved to be free. After the service, people came in small currents. They gripped my hands and placed little stories there. A former patient's daughter pressed a note into my palm. "Your wife held my mother's hand at the end," she said. "She sang to her so she wouldn't feel alone." We had never met. She smelled like wool and wind. I tucked the note into my coat and felt it like a pulse. Those were the minutes I wanted to protect. Those were what I would guard when the rest of it started to move. My granddaughter avoided my eyes and spoke to her camera instead. I watched her make shapes with her mouth that would later be edited to look kind. I did not belong in her frame. I had been the chair she moved. In her mind, I would stay moved. I did not correct her. I did not push back. I am not a pusher by instinct. I am a ledger keeper. That day, the ledger opened on its own. The rain sharpened against the stained glass. A single draft slipped under the door and touched my ankles. The funeral director brought me water and a manila folder. He whispered that Ruth had left something for me to review after. He tapped the word on the tab. The ink looked fresh, though I knew it had been prepared weeks before. Ruth's timing was always exact. The folder felt heavier than paper. I slid it into my bag and felt the zipper close like a stitch. Vanessa approached with a balanced smile. She spoke about optics and honoring Ruth's legacy and keeping the narrative clear. She said grief makes people unpredictable. She said we should set expectations for the wake. She said it all kindly, the way you might explain rules at a museum. I nodded and let her words pass by like traffic. I do not argue with slogans. I let them pass and I write down what they mean. What they meant was simple. I was allowed to mourn if it photographed well. I was allowed to stand if I stood in the right place. I was allowed to speak if I didn't say anything that made their faces look tight. I was allowed to be a symbol of devotion, as long as devotion didn't ask for a chair. I could do all that for 1 hour. I could do it for Ruth. And then I would take my chair back, and something else too. Someone laughed near the door, and the sound skittered along the floor like a coin. My granddaughter gathered her friends into a soft knot and practiced a eulogy for her followers. She had a different audience, and it was always waiting. She wasn't cruel by design. She was thoughtless by habit. Habits grow faster than people, unless you prune them. No one had pruned this one. If anything, they had watered it. The minister prayed. The room answered. I closed my eyes and saw Ruth standing at our kitchen sink, tapping a pen against a legal pad. She had made a list of things to handle after she was gone. She had written contact names, account numbers, and one line that made me laugh then and makes me breathe now. In storms, tie knots, not flags. A knot is quiet. A knot holds under strain. A flag is for show. I chose the knot then and there. It would not keep me from acting. It would keep me from spilling. When the pallbearers moved, the air changed. The cough of the door hinge sounded like a warning and a mercy. We stepped into the wet afternoon. The hearse waited. I watched the driver check his mirrors and his patience. I followed the line to the graveside tent and listened to the rain become a steady, wordless thing. People arranged themselves in neat order. Chairs appeared again, many of them. The same attendant carried my chair toward me with that kind face like a hand. My granddaughter saw him and shook her head. He stopped. He looked to me. I nodded to him to set it down anyway. He set it behind me. out of reach, as if that would please both of us. It pleased no one. It marked a choice I refused to make. So I stood. I stood through the last prayer. I stood through the handfuls of soil. I stood through the taste of damp earth when the wind shifted. I stood until my knees muttered and my back joined in. I stood because I wanted to remember exactly where the line was drawn. I stood so I could find it later with my eyes closed. There is a map inside every insult if you trace it right. A cousin hugged me a second too long and whispered that I should rest. A neighbor patted my shoulder and said to call if the lights flickered. The minister placed his hand on my sleeve and told me he was praying for courage. Courage, I thought, was sometimes paper with signatures. Courage was sometimes the sound of a pen scratching in a quiet room. Courage was often what we called patience until it paid. When the last car door thumped shut, the quiet felt like a blessing. The funeral director asked if I needed anything from the chapel before we left. I asked him, softly, if the livestream saved to a file. He said yes, it archived. He said families often asked for a copy. He said sometimes they wanted to share words with people who couldn't attend. He didn't ask why I needed it. He is good at his job. He understands that grief has errands. I pressed my palm against the manila folder in my bag and felt the corners of something stiff inside. A printed page, maybe two. Ruth's ink would be there, familiar and firm. She never looped her Y's. She never let lines drift uphill. She trusted paper because it doesn't pretend to be anything else. It is either blank or it is proof. I planned to open it at the kitchen table where we paid bills and planned summers. I planned to read slowly and obey. The family formed a receiving line at the hall. Vanessa signed smiles like places at a table. My granddaughter posed near the memory board and practiced a sad mouth. When she finally looked at me, it was quick and guarded, like a flinch she didn't want to own. I lifted my cup of lukewarm coffee. I nodded like a person who has made a note. The coffee tasted of tin and comfort. I drank it anyway. Warmth makes decisions easier. I do not think my granddaughter woke up that morning planning to be cruel. I think she woke up planning to be seen. Sometimes those plans overlap. If you don't stop to look down, you step on flowers. If no one ever taught you that flowers matter, you call it walking. I had learned, from Ruth, to bend and check what lived under my feet. I had learned from that red dot and that leather ledger that some flowers leave seeds even when they are crushed. They sprout later, in places you didn't expect. People asked about the scholarship jar Ruth's coworkers had started. They asked where to send donations. They asked if the hospital would name a bench after her. They asked if I needed anything. I said thank you. I said I would send an address. I said they could write her name on any quiet thing and she would like it. I did not say that the address I would send would change by night's end. I did not say that a bench is fine, but a door is better. Doors open. Doors close. Doors keep. When I finally stepped outside, the rain had softened. Tires hissed on wet streets. The world moved like it always does, indifferent and kind. I unlocked my car and sat with the bag on my lap. I did not turn the engine yet. I placed the folder on the passenger seat and looked at it the way you look at a horizon you know by heart. I thought about the chair. I thought about the scrape. I thought about the sentence that tried to shrink me. Shrinking is a choice when you have paper and a plan. I breathed in, counted 4, held it, let it go. The organ hum in my head faded to a line of air. I touched Ruth's sweater that I had folded there the week before, just to smell it when I needed courage. It smelled like clean cotton, and a little like her favorite eucalyptus balm. The scent moved something back into place. It felt like a hand between my shoulders saying, not yet, but soon. I started the engine. The wipers dragged once and cleared a path. I pulled out slow, letting a bus pass, letting a woman with an umbrella cross. Seattle did what Seattle does. Clouds stacked like gray books, lights going soft around the edges. The pavement, a mirror where the city checked its face. I drove with both hands on the wheel and one promise in my mouth like a pebble. I would not embarrass anyone. I would not raise my voice. I would not throw chairs. I would do something harder. I would do exactly what Ruth designed. Behind me, the chapel kept its records. In my bag, Ruth kept hers. Ahead, the road opened to a long, wet line, steady and patient. I took it, because that's what roads are for, and because I had somewhere to go that wasn't loud, and because the next part of grief is action. I had the proof I needed and the calm I preferred. I had a knot, not a flag. I tightened it once more and let the car roll. At the next light, I watched droplets gather, merge, and race toward the edge. They left faint trails that disappeared as the air warmed. That is how a day like this fades too. The marks are there until they aren't, but you remember the path. I remembered the path from the chair to the folder to the red dot. I remembered the line from the young voice to the old promise. I pressed the signal and turned toward home, where a table waited and a pen, and a clause I had not read yet, but already trusted. I did not plan dramatic speeches. I planned tea and reading. I planned to call one person, and then another, and then to let the paper walk where it needed to. I planned to sleep later, and maybe not at all. I planned to wake up to a changed map. I planned to do it without an audience. Grief is private, justice can be too. It doesn't need lights or music. It needs a steady hand and a place to sign. Ruth left me both. I drove toward them, with the chair's scrape still in my ears and the hum of tires like a low hymn, and the city sliding past as if it knew this route better than I did. I let it guide me to the first turn I had been avoiding. I took it because I am not furniture, and because I was done being moved. The wake smelled like coffee that forgot to be kind. Plates clicked. Words landed with soft edges and hard intentions. Vanessa moved through the room like a director. She placed people, trimmed stories, corrected tones. She used phrases that sound gentle, then pull a thread from your sweater. Lift the energy. No heavy moments. Keep Ruth glossy. I smiled the way you smile at weather. I let it pass, and I kept notes, because notes become maps. My granddaughter took the corner near the memory board. She curated sadness the way she curates outfits. Her friends hovered like stage lights. They coached her expression. They tested lines that would feel authentic later. I watched the rehearsal and stood outside the frame. Outside is where you can see the whole set. It's also where you can count. I counted small cuts. A photo turned face down because my hair was messy. A nurse's story trimmed to one sentence. A neighbor shushed when she cried. Every cut was tiny. Together they made a shape. I kept the shape in my pocket for later. People pressed my hands. Their words carried Ruth like a careful bowl. They told me about the way she spoke to pain. They told me about the little songs she hummed while she taped IV lines. Someone mentioned her habit of placing a spare granola bar on the nurse's station with a sticky note. For whoever forgot breakfast. The note made me feel found. I folded that feeling and kept it too. Vanessa arrived with a polite smile and a clipboard. She offered me a speaking slot toward the end. She suggested 2 minutes again, then maybe 30 seconds for final thanks. She touched my elbow like a parent guiding a child past a breakable shelf. We want a clean arc, she said. I nodded and thought about how grief resists arcs. It's more like weather that refuses your plans. Even so, I accepted the timing. I had my own clock now. I tried to eat a forkful of something. It tasted like paper, napkins, and salt. A volunteer offered me water and a seat. The seat was tucked behind a plant. I thanked him and stood. Standing kept the memory of the chair bright in my body. Memory is useful when you need to draw straight lines later. A nurse from Ruth's unit found me by the coffee urn. She wore her badge on a lanyard with tiny hearts. Your wife saved me my first month, she whispered. She showed me how to chart when my hands shook. She pressed a folded bill into the scholarship jar. The jar had appeared on the table with a simple label, Ruth Hale Nursing Scholarship. Coins clinked against glass like small applause. The sound steadied me. It sounded like something that wouldn't be edited. I reached for my bag and felt the manila folder. The tab said, After. The word worked on me like a key. I slid a finger under the flap and touched stiff paper. I didn't pull it out. I wanted our table. I wanted our lamp. I wanted to open it where Ruth and I solved things like a team. So I closed the flap and let the key wait. Vanessa announced a video montage. Photos floated across a screen to a song that never meant anything to us. People dabbed eyes. At the end, my granddaughter's face filled the room. She spoke about legacy and light. Her voice held that practiced quiver, tuned to the exact note that plays well online. No one mentioned the scrape. No one mentioned the chair. That silence was part of the plan, I think. Plans like that crack underweight. I planned to add weight. When it was my turn, I took the microphone and thanked everyone. I said 3 sentences about Ruth's stubborn kindness. I said 1 sentence about slow goodbyes. I returned the microphone and watched the relief pass across a few faces. Relief is loud when people are afraid of mess. I stored the sound for later. The funeral director caught my eye as I stepped away. He touched the leather book near the door. It looked old enough to remember better days. He nodded once, a small question. I nodded back, a smaller answer. He understood. Good people in quiet jobs often do. Quiet jobs run on records. Records feed truth when truth grows thin. Back in the car, the wipers ticked like a patient metronome. The city folded itself into gray. I drove the long way home because I wanted the road to rinse the day. I wanted to arrive ready. The folder rode in the passenger seat like a co-pilot who preferred silence. I spoke to Ruth in my head, the way you do when you want advice without interruptions. She answered the way she always did, with lists, with steps, with proof. At home, I set the folder on our kitchen table. The table had a tired groove where we always signed holiday cards. I made tea because ritual frames paper. I opened the folder and found 3 things. A letter with Ruth's neat block letters. A copy of the Hale Family Living Trust, bound with a blue strip and labeled at the side. A smaller envelope with the attorney's card, paperclipped to it. The card read, Asha Patel, JD. I liked the weight of the card. It promised competence. I read the letter first. Ruth had written the way she talked when she wanted to spare you trouble, straight to the point and kind in the margins. She explained updates we made the winter. The insults began to sharpen. She reminded me of the notary's name, and the day we drove to sign the amendment. She underlined a clause number, 11.1, Conduct Covenant. She wrote the words verification path and a parenthesis, video, incident log, witness statement. She wrote, use only if they make a public scene, never for private pain. Private pain is for forgiveness. I sat with that sentence until the tea cooled. I lifted the trust binder. The blue strip flexed and settled. Tabs divided sections like rooms in a house. Section 11 held more than a number. It held a decision we made when we finally admitted the pattern had teeth. We had drafted the language with Asha after a birthday lunch that turned sour. Maya had rolled her eyes when I spoke, then made a joke about my cardigan that drew a laugh too easy and too sharp. Ruth had watched the moment from across the table. She watched, not like a scold, but like a scientist. She collected the data and called it by its right name later. Disrespect, patterned, public. She said we would not punish. We would build guardrails and let consequences steer. The clause was clean. It tied inheritance to basic public decency during the funeral and wake. It defined humiliation like a nurse charts pain. Observable, not guessed. It required verification. It named where the forfeited share would go if the clause triggered, not to us, not to some personal joy. To a nursing scholarship fund for students who needed that first opened door. She had written that part with a soft smile. Let it grow something, she had said. If we must break a branch, plant a tree. I traced the notary seal with my thumb. The raised edges felt like a seatbelt. They held. I flipped to the signature page and found our names. I remembered her hand on mine as we signed. Her fingers cold because clinics run cold. Her eyes warm because she loved that paper could keep a promise when people forgot. I placed the binder down and let my breath catch up. I opened the small envelope. Inside sat a USB drive with a handwritten label, R, 2 minutes. I did not play it yet. Some things deserve ceremony. I noted the instructions. Asha's card listed office hours and a direct number with a simple instruction. In a storm, call. I looked at the window. The rain still made its soft lines. I decided storm counted. I dialed and left a call message. I said my name. I said we spoke months ago. I said the clause might be relevant now. I did not rush. Rushing distorts facts. I stated the facts. A public statement. A moved chair. A recorded service. A director with a ledger. I left my number and a promise to send whatever she needed. I placed the phone down. Not like a weapon, but like a tool that had done its first job. I emailed the funeral home. The subject line was plain: livestream archive request, hail service. I asked for the file. I asked if the incident log held an entry for the chair or any recorded disruption. I thanked them in the way Ruth liked: short, sincere, spelled correctly. I attached my program photo so they could confirm my identity without back and forth. I typed and retyped the words until they felt balanced. Words matter when you build a bridge you plan to cross. I gathered our receipts: hospice bills with clean columns, pharmacy printouts that tracked a slow avalanche of tiny pills, gas station receipts from long drives to appointments, grocery lists with notes about broth and peaches. I stacked them by month and by cost. The final hospice total read $42,800. Numbers like that bruise. They also testify. I did not need them for the clause. I needed them for truth. Truth wears numbers like armor when people start narrating your life for you. I found the notary's card in our drawer where we store stamps and tape. I remembered the day we signed. The woman had praised Ruth's handwriting. Ruth had smiled and said, "It keeps me honest." The notary laughed, then checked IDs, then pressed the seal. We took a photo of our hands near the stamp because small ceremonies keep steady. I slid the photo beside the binder. It looked like two people building a quiet dam. The phone buzzed. A new email from the funeral director. He wrote with the same gentle precision he had used all day. He confirmed the archive existed and would be ready to download after processing. He also wrote, "We do keep an incident book. I made a brief note regarding the seating request and your choice to stand. Happy to provide a copy if helpful." The words "if helpful" carried more weight than their size. Helpful is what truth is when it's on paper. I replied with thanks and asked for the scanned page. I added a request for a short statement that the service was recorded from start to finish. I used soft words and exact questions. Exact questions give people room to be exact back. He wrote he would send both when he returned to the office. I slept lightly. The house felt too big and exactly right. The chair scrape replayed once, then softened. Grief took its place beside me like a cat that demands presence and gives warmth. I woke to first light and tea. I checked my email with the slow caution you use when the past might be waiting. At 9:17 a.m., the funeral home sent the scan. The subject line read, "Archive plus ledger note." The PDF showed a neat line in the incident book: date, service name, short description. Family member requested chair be moved. Widow stood by choice. No disruption to proceedings. The line said more than it said. It said someone watched with their eyes on order. It said the scrape occurred in a room designed for mercy. It said I did not imagine it. It said a witness made a mark that would not fade with anyone's mood. I saved the file in 3 places. I named it with the date and the word verified. The second attachment was the download link. The still frame showed the chapel's front. The red dot glowed in the corner like a tiny heart that forgot to be quiet. I didn't press play yet. I needed Asha, and steps and a cup of tea that didn't go cold. I needed to stay disciplined. Discipline turns anger into action without spilling. I showered and put on Ruth's gray sweater. It hung warm and light. I folded the sleeves once. I tied my hair the way she liked when I needed my face clear. I called the hospital foundation and asked about scholarship frameworks. The woman on the phone spoke with the steady cheer of people who live inside hope. She explained timelines and endowments and what names can do on a plaque. She didn't know that name would arrive heavier by evening. I knew. I didn't say it. I only took down instructions and promised a callback soon. I reached Vanessa by text. I wrote a thank you for yesterday's coordination. I told her I would handle some paperwork and then rest. I did not mention the clause. Clauses work best when they arrive like rain you forgot you needed. She replied with a heart and a reminder to send her a few photos before I post anything. I read the text twice and did not answer. Some requests don't need no, they need gravity. Gravity comes later. I walked through the house and touched our anchors. The picture from the mountains, the bowl of smooth stones from someone's vacation. The first grocery list we wrote on the back of an envelope, still pinned by a magnet shaped like a strawberry. These objects hold you when voices try to move your chair. They say you are not an accessory. They say you are not a guest in your own rooms. They say you are not furniture. Around noon, my neighbor Alma knocked with soup in a jar and the old firmness of Midwestern comfort. She sat, and we let the silence settle. Then she said, without ceremony, "I saw." She didn't say what. She didn't need to. Witnesses sometimes speak like that, clean, without decoration. She put her hand on the table and left it there. I set mine beside it. Our hands made a small bridge that didn't need paint. We talked about power that hides inside nice words. We talked about how women learn to make themselves smaller to keep dinners smooth. We talked about the line between peacekeeping and erasure. We drew the line on a napkin with a blunt pencil and laughed because drawing lines is both childlike and fierce. Then I showed her the folder. She read Clause 11.1 the way you read a safety sign near a bridge. She exhaled and said, "Ruth built a railing." I nodded. I felt the railing under my palm. Afternoon softened the light. I printed the emails and placed them beneath the binder clip. I watched the printer feed paper like a small, patient factory. The neat stack grew and became a body. Bodies speak louder than mouths when they wear signatures. I filled a legal pad with steps. Call Asha. Download the archive. Request the guest video someone filmed behind me. Ask the director for a short verification statement on letterhead. Prepare a letter for heirs summarizing the clause. Keep adjectives out. Keep nouns in. Keep verbs clean. My phone buzzed. A message from Maya appeared, full of bright emojis and careful distance. "Hey, are you okay? Yesterday was intense. We want to make sure everything looks respectful." The word looks dragged behind her sentence like a loose shoelace. I typed and deleted 3 responses. I settled on, "I am managing the records today. We'll speak once I'm done." She replied with a thumbs up. She sent a photo from the memory board, cropped neat. I noticed the edges first. The crop removed anything complicated. Cropping is a kind of chair moving too. I called Asha. Her voice was warm and practiced. She asked gentle questions and one hard one. "Do you want to pursue this now, or do you need time?" I told her time had begun yesterday. I told her I had the archive link and the ledger scan. I told her the words. I didn't perform them. I placed them on the table between us and let them be heavy. She said she would prepare a notice letter. She said the law likes documents, not drama. She asked me to send the files and the names. I did, with a subject line that felt like a small thunderhead. Conduct. Covenant evidence. Hail. I brewed fresh tea and sat with the house. I heard the fridge hum and the rain hush and my own breath move in and out. I pictured Ruth, charting vitals at a night station, pen tapping, mind clear. She would approve of this pace. She did not love spectacle. She loved procedures that respect the body you're trying to save. This body was a family body. It needed a steady hand. Late afternoon, the funeral home emailed a short statement on letterhead. It confirmed the live stream ran continuously. It confirmed the incident note. It offered condolences again in the kind of sentence you keep and reread. I slid the statement into the stack and clipped it. The clip clicked like a small machine sealing a box. The sound pleased me. Machines remind you that actions can be exact. I opened the USB. I did not press play. I read the file name and the date. I placed it back and closed the cap. I wanted her voice to arrive at the right moment, not to soothe me in a private loop. Some words work better when witnesses are nearby. Some words make bridges only when crossed with company. I left that bridge for tomorrow. Dusk leaned through the window. The streetlights coughed awake. The living room took on that soft evening hush where you hear the house think. I set the stack, the binder, and the USB beside Ruth's sweater. I traced the stitch she repaired last winter. Her needlework was invisible if you didn't know where to look. That is a skill. That is also the opposite of today's problem. I walked to the window and watched the road. Cars passed with a sound like someone smoothing sheets. Somewhere a siren threaded a careful line. I felt a steadiness that didn't owe anyone a smile. I felt like a woman holding a railing that she paid for with patience and ink. The humiliation still lived in my bones, but it had neighbors now. Proof. Process. Purpose. They make good neighbors. They borrow sugar and return it with interest. I washed the mugs and left them on the rack. I turned off the kitchen light and let the hallway glow guide me back. I checked the door lock twice, not from fear, but from a love of finished steps. I touched the binder again and felt the raised notary seal catch the pad of my thumb. I imagined tomorrow's calls moving through wires like small electric prayers. I pictured the clause stepping into daylight and doing what it was built to do. I pictured a scholarship letter sent to a nurse who needed it more than anyone needed applause. I changed into soft clothes and lay on our bed with the lamp dimmed. The room smelled faintly of eucalyptus and clean laundry. I closed my eyes and the chair scrape returned as a clear line, not a jagged one. It linked to the red dot, to the ledger line, to the seal, to the card. Lines like that hold a day together when people try to pull it apart. I slept, not for long, but deep enough to dream of Ruth walking down a hospital corridor, counting breaths, holding charts, turning at the exact room, because turning at the right room is the whole job. Morning would bring signatures and letters and email subject lines that sound like thunder but mean rain. It would bring words that stop people mid-sentence and make them reach for their own chairs. It would bring a call from Asha with precise steps and a tone that refuses panic. It would bring me to the place where public pain becomes public record. It would bring the first movement of a promise we both signed. For tonight, the house held me. The road outside quieted. The tea cooled. The evidence waited with the patience of paper. And somewhere, the archive finished processing, storing a truth that would not blur under anyone's filter. I turned on my side and let that knowledge cross my shoulders like a blanket. Warm. Simple. Enough. I slept with my palm open, like I was still holding a program that had stopped shaking and a chair I would return to its place. Asha called with a voice that made rooms steadier. She asked me to breathe and walk the plan. I told her what I had, the archive link, the ledger scan, the note. She asked for one more angle to seal the triangle. A guest clip from the pews would make the proof complete. I knew exactly who would have it and why. Alma doesn't film for spectacle, she films for memory. She had stood 2 rows behind me with her phone low. I called and asked, and she said yes before I finished. She dropped the file into a shared folder. The sound caught the scrape like a struck match. My name held steady over the hush, then the sentence landed. I watched once, then stopped, and sent it to Asha. She replied with words I could hold like handles. This is sufficient. We proceed with notice. I downloaded the live stream and labeled it cleanly. The still frame showed flowers and stone and restraint. The red dot pulsed in the corner like a witness with a heartbeat. The funeral director emailed a second statement on letterhead. He confirmed the camera angle and the duration. He confirmed the ledger entry with the same careful tone. The packet began to take shape on the table. Archive link, guest clip, ledger scan, letterhead verification, clause excerpt. I smoothed each page the way Ruth smoothed chart corners. Asha drafted the notice and read the heart of it aloud. Her voice was precise, not cruel. Any heir who publicly humiliates the widow during the funeral forfeits their share. I heard the clause the way you hear an oath. It didn't shout, it aligned. It held the day upright without demanding applause. She told me to gather the family to read the clause. She wanted witnesses who were present for the scrape. She wanted the moment to match the harm, public but sober. I texted a time and a place in the same hall. No drama, no agenda, just, we need 10 minutes. Vanessa replied with a thumbs up and, we'll keep it elegant. Elegance had done enough damage. I set the room the way nurses set trays. Water, chairs, copies, a small speaker for the note. Maya arrived last, glossy and late by habit. She took a chair without looking at me. She studied the ceiling, as if truth might be written there. I began with thanks for their help during the service. I kept my voice low and my sentences short. I told them I had a few things to share. I played Ruth's 2-minute file first. Her voice entered the room like a key turns a lock. She sounded like a night shift at peace with the work. If they make you small, use what we built, she said. She had recorded it weeks ago when her breathing ran shallow. She had that gentle authority that outlives bodies. She named the pattern she'd seen without blaming anyone. She asked for dignity as the minimum price of love. She asked me not to argue where paper could speak. I let the silence after her words run its full course. People look different when they hear a dead woman ask for mercy. Vanessa folded her hands like a prayer that forgot the words. I set the trust binder beside the speaker. I opened clause 11.1 and placed a finger on the line. I read it exactly as written, without heat, without garnish. Any heir who publicly humiliates the widow during the funeral or wake forfeits their share. Verification, video, incident log, witness. The sentence was air and metal at once. No one spoke for a heartbeat that lasted longer than it should. I said there was verification. I said the chapel archived the service from start to finish. I said the incident log included a note. I did not add adjectives. I did not add memory. I let nouns and verbs do their jobs. Vanessa tried to break the fall with soft cloth. She said people were emotional and tensions were high. She said intent should matter when judging tone. I said action mattered because the clause measured action. I said Ruth had written it that way on purpose. I said the day was a boundary, not a stage. Maya stared at the table, then at her hands. She looked 22 and older than she needed to be. She lifted her chin the way she had by the casket. She said, flat, I didn't mean it like that. Meaning is a poor substitute for repair. I waited to see if repair would arrive. Asha, on speaker, explained the path the clause allows. A genuine apology recorded for the widow and community. A forfeiture, if not, redirected to the scholarship in Ruth's name. She said the apology must be plain and complete. She said euphemism would fail the test. She said law respects sentences that admit the act. Maya's face flickered like someone scrolling too fast. Vanessa touched her sleeve and chose a different strategy. She asked what forfeiture meant in numbers, not feelings. I told them the share amount with the same calm tone. Money is not rude when it tells the truth. It sat in the room like a chair nobody wanted to move. Vanessa began to negotiate air. She offered alternative wording, alternate timing, alternate venues. She suggested a family-only recording that never leaves the chat. Asha said the clause did not bend around optics. She said public harm requires public repair. She said the mechanism would otherwise route the share exactly as written. I pressed the button and played the pew clip once. The scrape filled the room with its small violence. The line followed with the clean cruelty of a practiced tone. Maya covered her mouth for the first time all day. She watched her own posture and heard her own words. It is hard to argue with a mirror that also records sound. I stopped the video before anyone else spoke. We had enough. I placed the USB on the binder like an answer key. No one asked to replay it. No one asked to fast forward. Everyone saw what the camera had seen. Vanessa straightened a stack of papers that didn't need straightening. She said they needed time to think. Time has a way of sounding like strategy when money is nearby. I told them they had that time, but not forever. The clause had deadlines because dignity does. Asha read the date from the draft notice with clean emphasis. We walked through how the notice would travel. Certified mail, email, and a duplicate delivered by hand. I promised to send them identical packets the same day. No one raised a voice. No one cried. The plan did not require tears to work. Alma stood in the doorway because I'd asked her to witness. She nodded once when our eyes met. She left without speaking because speaking was not the job today. I closed the binder and collected the pages. My hands didn't shake anymore. Paper steadies hands when it sits right. Maya tried a smaller defense at the threshold. She said she didn't want me to feel excluded. She said she was protecting, quote, the family brand. I told her grief is not a brand. I told her chairs are not props. I told her protection begins with the person who paid the cost. She asked if saying sorry would truly matter. I said it would if it named the harm and faced the room. I said some doors open only after you knock with your whole hand. We left the hall as if we just finished a shift. Tired, precise, minds clear from working the checklist. The sky lowered and found its darker shade. At home, I scanned the signed notices and cued the emails. The subject line read, Notice of Conduct Covenant Trigger. The body contained 3 paragraphs and 0 excuses. I addressed each packet to the heirs listed by Asha. I slipped the statement copies in their sleeves. I sealed the envelopes and wrote the return address twice. I drove to the post office because movement quiets adrenaline. I placed the stack on the counter and watched stamps turn into action. The clerk didn't know he was pressing weight onto a day that tried to float. I sent Asha the tracking numbers and the scans. She replied with a short line I saved. "You did that exactly right." Exact feels better than brave when paper is involved. I let myself breathe and watched the kitchen find evening. Ruth's sweater kept the chair warm beside me. Her handwriting faced up in the letter like a small lantern. At sundown, the notice emails left my outbox and stepped into theirs. Subject lines make a different sound when they matter. Some doors close softly. These clicked with a finality you can hear. Vanessa replied with a long paragraph that circled the drain. She wanted to, quote, contextualize and align feelings and minimize impact. She did not mention the scholarship by name. Maya sent nothing at first. Silence can be contempt, and it can be shock. I didn't assign meaning. I let the clock do that work. Asha filed the formal notice with the trust administrator. She attached the proof triad and the letterhead. She copied me so I could see the mechanism engage. Mechanisms are not cold when they guard warmth. They move so a person can stop moving for a while. They move so a widow can sit in her own house with both feet on the floor. I poured tea and opened Ruth's letter again. The ink had not faded overnight. Her voice still traveled through the room like a steady hand. "I trust you to do the quiet, right thing," she wrote. "Trust is heavier than any inheritance. It asks more and gives more back." The phone rang once and stopped. My son, perhaps, deciding whether love wants a lawyer present. I let the call miss me and sent a text that said we'd speak soon. I lit the little candle Ruth kept for power outages. It made the kitchen gentler and the papers seem less stern. I thought of the nurse who would one day open a scholarship envelope. I thought of the apology that might yet arrive. I thought of the path if it didn't. Both paths led away from the chair scrape. I replayed Ruth's 2 minutes, alone this time. Her words did not sting, they settled. She had built the railing, I had put my hand on it and walked. Outside, the street darkened and softened. A bus sighed at the corner and moved on. The house felt sure of itself again. My phone finally chimed with a new message. Maya asked what the apology needed to include. She didn't ask how to sound. She asked what to say. I wrote back with the simplest truth. Name the act, name the harm, ask forgiveness without arranging the outcome. I told her the clause requires public repair, not public theater. She replied with a draft that bent around the center. She said, miscommunication and tension and hard day. I told her that wasn't the door, that was the wallpaper. She sent another, closer now. She named the chair and the words and the place. She said she was wrong to police grief. I told her to sleep on it and send it again in daylight. Sincerity grows when you let the night resize your ego. She wrote a final line that almost landed. I will say it in the room you stood in. Rooms remember who they held and how they held them. That room would know whether her voice brought weight or polish. I set the phone down and let the house breathe. The plan was in motion, and my voice was not a weapon. It was a hand on a railing doing exactly what Ruth asked. The scholarship form sat open on my laptop. Fields waited for numbers and a name that mattered. I typed carefully and checked twice, the way she did. My eyes burned the way paper burns in stories, but safer. I closed them and pictured the green light that waits at the end of rain. I pictured the chair return to its place, steady and unremarkable. I would stand there tomorrow and hear the apology if it came. I would rout the share if it didn't. Either way, the day would stop scraping. I rinsed the mug and turned off the lamp. The kitchen went dim and honest. The house held the papers and the proof and the sweater. The night held the rest. Some nights mother patience, some nights mother consequence. This one mothered both, because Ruth planned it that way. Morning brought a clear sky, pretending to apologize. I didn't need the weather's help. I needed the room again, the same chairs, the same air that remembered what it held. I asked the director for 10 quiet minutes. He understood the way people who keep ledgers understand storms. We stood where the lilies had faded. Alma waited by the door like a lighthouse. Asha's voice rode the small speaker, steady as a handrail. Vanessa arranged her mouth into calm. Maya stood with her shoulders squared and her phone dark. She took a breath that had nothing to sell. She began without embroidery. She named the chair. She named the words. She named the harm, like a door you can finally knock on. She said she thought she was protecting image. She said image is a poor god and grief is not a brand. She said she was wrong to police sorrow, and she asked forgiveness without asking for a prize. I listened with my chest, not my fear. Her voice did not perform. It came through like a steady rain. Asha asked her to repeat the line that mattered in case the mic missed it. She did, slower. The room held it. I held it. Then I nodded, not to erase the scrape, but to mark the repair. The clause allows repair to restore what arrogance forfeits. It doesn't promise a reset to yesterday. Yesterday is closed. Today learned a language it didn't want to know. I looked at Maya and kept my voice even. I told her the apology satisfied the covenant. I told her the share would not divert. I told her repair asks for more than words when shame was public. Vanessa moved to speak. I lifted a palm and finished. I offered what Ruth and I built for Mercy, 20 volunteer hours at the scholarship office this quarter. A small education grant administered by the fund if those hours are completed on time. No speeches about transformation. No posts. Just chairs placed where they belong, and doors open for people who carry long nights on their backs. Maya agreed with a simple yes that didn't hunt applause. She handed me the house key she still carried from last summer. I won't need this, she said. She meant more than a key. Boundaries click like locks when you mean them. I thanked her and kept my face steady. Gratitude doesn't dilute a line. It makes the line hold. Vanessa asked about optics and statements. I said no statements. I said no coordination. I said no more approvals before I grieve. I said if anyone needs a quote, they can read a ledger. She tried a smile that once worked. The room, bless it, did not return the favor. Some rooms stop rewarding choreography once they've seen the rehearsal. We signed 2 papers, not to dramatize, but to document. The apology transcript would live with the trust as a note of compliance. The volunteer hours would live with the foundation as a promise with a calendar. Asha read the last line like a benediction for adults. We are done here. We were, at least with the part that needed law. After they left, Alma and I sat in the front pew and let the quiet finish what words begin. She squeezed my hand and said only, "Good." It didn't mean victory. It meant alignment. It meant the floor felt level again. It meant I could sit without asking permission from anyone who did not pay my costs. I drove to the hospital foundation with the packet Ruth would have organized in half the time. We spoke about the fund the way nurses discuss a shift, clearly, with the names spelled right. We set criteria Ruth would have loved. First-generation students, night shift aides who want nursing seats, caregivers who have lived the work in their bones. We put her name where it belongs, not on a plaque that catches dust, but on an envelope that finds a kitchen table in winter. On my way home, I stopped by the funeral home with a tin of cookies. The director smiled the tired smile of people who escort strangers through hard doors. I thanked him for his ledger. He thanked me for my quiet. We understood each other's religion. At home, I gathered the props of this small war and put them back into their drawers. Binder to the file cabinet, USB to the safe. Letters tied with a plain ribbon because order calms and memory needs clean shelves. I texted my son and told him what happened in 4 sentences, none of them sharp. He replied with a line that made my throat warm. "Mom, I'm coming by to listen." Listening is heavier than help when you mean it. I walked through the house and returned chairs to their places. I set one for Ruth by habit, then smiled at myself and tucked her sweater over the back. The room changed temperature 2 degrees toward Mercy. I made tea the way she liked. I drank it slowly, like a promise that doesn't need witnesses. Keys came home. The group chat dimmed to a low hum. Vanessa attempted a soft rewrite in a tidy message. I let it pass without entering the edit bay. Public performance moved on to other stages. The scholarship began to collect small light. Alma dropped off a check with a note as plain as a recipe. Nurses, do that. Give without drumroll. The jar on our counter clinked. Clinks sound like forward. By nightfall, the scholarship page went live with Ruth's name, above a single sentence about hands that held other hands. I read it twice, then closed the laptop because joy should end before it becomes a show. I opened the window and let the air rinse the rooms. The city smelled like wet cedar and bus breaks and dinner somewhere I wasn't invited to and didn't miss. Maya sent a final text asking if she could volunteer on Saturday mornings. I told her yes and bring comfortable shoes. She replied, "I will, and nothing else." Growth doesn't announce itself. It clocks in. That was enough. I put the phone down without making a shrine. I sat at the kitchen table where we marked seasons with receipts and postcards. I wrote to the first recipient of the fund in plain ink. I told them a good woman loved proof because proof keeps promises safe. I told them the world will try to move their chair. I told them to keep their seat, and if they must stand, to do it on paper and come back stronger. The house settled, the fridge hummed, the heater sighed. I breathed without counting for the first time in days. The scrape had become a line in a ledger, and the ledger had done what it was designed to do. No fireworks, no speeches, just gravity deciding where weight belongs. I took Ruth's sweater and drove the long way to nowhere, the way we did when the city felt too close. The road shone like a polished spoon. Headlights slid past like slow comets. The wipers made patient music without asking for credit. I drove until the rain eased and a green light held steady over an empty intersection. There, with the dashboard glow on my hands, I said the last words I owed the day. Thank you for holding. Thank you for proof. Thank you for the chair. I rolled forward on a road that finally stopped arguing with me. And if this story steadied you, ride with me a second. Tap like, leave your voice in the comments, and share this green light with someone who needs it.